A Clearer View on Love is a relationships podcast for women with clarity coaches Lucy Bainbridge and Joe Munday, helping you be your true self in all your romantic interactions.
Hello everybody, welcome to the 6th edition of A Clearer View on Love. Today we are talking about a very taboo subject, which is sex and orgasming and how to make good sex great. And so we are very privileged to have Thom Carey, who is an expert in relationship, and he coaches mainly men in how to make good sex great. And he wrote a beautiful article which is really like the most simple approach to having good sex, because we're all very caught up on techniques and doing the right thing and behaviour and what's good for people and what's not, and Thom brings it right back to the beginning and the simple, the source behind what all of that comes from. So today's topic is, how can I help my partner orgasm? These things are not very talked about. As soon as a sex conversation comes up in a relationship, it can get awkward and it can get stressful and people get very upset about all these things. So we're just trying to air that, because I think the more that these things come to the light, the less daunting and scary they look. So welcome, Thom, and Joe's here as well, Joe Munday. And Joe, do you want to say what you found from the article?
Yeah, so thanks, Lucy. Just before we speak to Thom, it was just really powerful to hear someone writing about presence in sex and connection in a very kind of pure and simple way, because there's so much information and advice out there that is very techniquey, and even with something like sex, which is obviously, it's kind of common sense that it's all about connection. It's kind of like, well, yeah, obviously, but like if you look at an article in like Cosmopolitan magazine or something, it would be sort of like top tips for this or whatever, and it all seems to come down to things like certain body parts or whatever, and it's quite kind of almost a bit clinical and detached. So, and I think that the temptation when we're with someone who perhaps doesn't experience orgasm easily, or we're not ourselves, is to maybe hone in on details rather than look at the kind of root of what's going on. And I know from my own experience, I have in the past struggled with orgasm and not really realised it was my own thinking about that was actually making it worse, and that I kind of almost needed to do less rather than more. And so we're all kind of interested in this area, and kind of I feel come from a similar kind of outlook in terms of how that connectedness can be achieved. So yeah, I was wondering if Thom, you'd just like to say a bit more about your article and how that came about.
Sure. So first off, it's good to talk to both you and Lucy. About a year and a half ago, close to 2 years ago, I got divorced, and at the time I made up a story that one of the reasons for that was it's because our sex life wasn't very good, and per this episode, orgasms were lacking, and I was just massively insecure when I got back into the dating world about having sex. I just felt pretty inexperienced, really insecure, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I immersed myself in manuals and books on how to have better sex. Everything ranging from how to talk dirty to where to put my fingers, where to put all of my different body parts and all of a woman's different body parts. And some of it worked, but I always felt they got me just more in my head, and I felt that although I had more knowledge in my head, I still wasn't having the really type of incredible pleasure and incredible intimacy that I just knew that sex could be. So about 6 months into my own search, and I started learning basically the principles behind having a clearer head. And I had this insight that what if I didn't do any of that? What if I didn't What if I didn't do any of the techniques? What if I didn't care about what was happening knowledge-wise, or I was doing anything? And I just said, what if I just got present? What if I just did nothing except for get in connection with the woman that I was with? And things started massively turning around for me. I went from basically, it's hard to say. I don't ever want to use the term I gave her orgasms, but I just started being with women where they were having no orgasms during our intimate play, to every time I'm with a woman, she's for the most part going to have an orgasm. And the shift was so massive that it blew my mind and really inspired me. And out of what that insight was, I wrote that article. And I'm trying to tell men that are also immersing themselves in different types of knowledge of manuals and how-to prescriptive type stuff. I always try to say it's the exact opposite. We need to do less. The only thing we need to do is get in connection. The only thing we need to do is get present. And it's worked.
Wow. I love that, Tom. You're so clear. Like, that was so beautiful just to hear your honesty in that. I do feel for men in particular, actually, because, you know, there's this women orgasm or they don't, but there's this pressure on the guy to perform. And the women we don't have that, right? So there's this kind of, I can imagine how much thinking there is around it from the perspective of a man, and actually probably that we don't appreciate that as much as a woman, because we've not been taught that that's something that we need to be to do. So I can imagine then coming into this question about, you know, if it's, say for instance, someone's got a problem and, you know, suddenly someone's not able to orgasm or something like that, then a woman or a man, or I mean, because if a woman is then feeling, oh God, I can't have an orgasm, and she has to be honest about that, then you know, it's so natural for the man to take it on, like, I've done something wrong, this is about me, and the woman's going to go, what's wrong with me? And it all turns into this personal kind of bad situation that no one wants to talk about. And the more thinking there is around it, the more, to me, it just seems like the bigger it gets and the more it gets created and causes a lot of pain. So there's kind of two things. There's kind of just like learning how to come away from that kind of pressure. And then there's also, you know, but at the same time wanting for it to be sorted out. So what would you say in terms of specifically talking about orgasm, then, like, what do you suggest? What do you say to people?
The three things that I'd point to for someone in that situation, let's say you're not having an orgasm, or you think yourself not orgasmic. One, and I don't want to convince someone of this fact. It's one of the things that I know enough that I do believe it's true. And there's enough science out there that proves that every man and every woman is orgasmic. So if someone says that there's something wrong with them and they have a special scientific diagnosis that says they're not, I beg to differ. I've seen enough science and publications around this that I know that they can orgasm. And the number one thing, and I just think it always comes down to thought. It always comes down to people are in their heads and instead of in their bodies when they're having sex, and they're either thinking exactly what you're saying. That whole question that you asked me, that you posed me for this is perfect. We're doing a podcast together. Some people will have that conversation in their heads while they're having sex instead of being in connection with their partner. So, you know, like, that's immediately limiting them. And so, like, one, I point them towards, you know, it's you, it's your head, it's your thoughts, it's your busy thinking that's limiting the ability to have an orgasm. And the prescription for that is I tell them that orgasm is not the point of sex. I study and I'm teaching Tantra at this point, and one of the key proponents of Tantra is one of the points of sex is connection. So it's not an end game. It's not, I'm going to have an orgasm, then you have an orgasm, then we go to sleep. We're going to be in connection, and our bodies are going to be intermingled, and we're going to explore each other's hearts and our souls and our bodies for the next amount of time. And if an orgasm comes or if it doesn't come, whatever happens is perfect. And the more accepting that we can be of the moment, of whatever shows up, the more likely an orgasm will actually be, because we're not focusing on that end game. We're just focusing on being with one another. And you can be with one another regardless of any of the things that happens. If you get in a favored sexual position, or if you have an orgasm or not, none of it matters, because you're there for the purpose of connection, and you're able to accomplish that. And then your body responds positively for the most part.
And I love what you're saying about, it's like dropping expectations of what an orgasm is, or what it should look like, or what it should sound like, or what it should feel like, and like a freedom from that. Those thoughts is something that I have found personally is like releasing. It's kind of any expectations of what I should be doing or what the other person should be doing. And what you're saying, Tom, about thought and the amount of thought we can actually have, that our thoughts can be quite sped up during sex, which is actually kind of almost like a block to connection, because of in those moments of presence there's not much thought or expectations, or it's just pure kind of presence in the moment. And it sounds really obvious just saying that out loud, but I think for years I wasn't aware of that, or thinking maybe like in other areas of my life, like I could almost think my way to a solution or something. And there was something else I quickly wanted to bring up, which you mentioned about the science around, everyone has the kind of the physical ability to have an orgasm, and I heard a sex therapist talk years ago, and he was talking about many women who have never experienced an orgasm or can't experience orgasm have the nervous system, everything's in place there, so why aren't they doing it? And what really came up for me as someone who had spent years not being able to orgasm was that of course it was kind of like a no-brainer to me. It was kind of like, well, obviously the nerve endings are there, but it's actually the opposite of that. So rather than not being feeling, it's kind of like too much feeling. And I think this is really important for men to hear, especially when they're worried that they're not pleasing their partner, is that actually the feeling can feel so overwhelming that it almost feels like it's going to kill you. And because of that, you sort of pull away from it. So it's kind of like almost over the nerves are too sensitive. It's basically avoiding it. So again, kind of coming back to where that experience is coming from, and realizing that you are safe, and a feeling isn't going to kill you. And I think a lot of women do feel this, that it's actually too much, but that's not really kind of talked about or heard about, because there's a feeling that perhaps they're not turned on or whatever, but actually it's the pure sensation is just too much to feel, to keep the connection, to keep the presence, it would just drive me into kind of anxiety, and then obviously I'm disconnected and I can't relax or then continue, basically.
Wow. I love that you said that, Jo. That is just so helpful. And I think this is where this whole faking thing comes in. It's this fear that in kind of admitting that you haven't orgasmed or you have or whatever, that you're going to hurt the guy's pride, because there's this kind of need for them to have that outcome, that's needed. And it isn't, from a woman's point of view. It isn't needed. It isn't about that. It really isn't, though, is it? Like, for ages, I didn't orgasm as well. Like, I was about 22. I always had to go through that thing, right? Like, this is the point where you pretend. Do you know what I mean? And it just creates this charade in needing, in this whole idea that that's a necessary thing. And that's just what you were saying, Tom, about it isn't what the sex is about. That's not what sex is about. That's not what makes good sex either. Because if that was the case, then all we would be doing, we wouldn't need a partner. We could just do it ourselves. So, Tom, I'm interested in knowing, like, what kind of results have you been seeing in other people?
I'll speak to the type of results, and it's funny how magically and easily this works. Which is, one of my first clients was asking me how to have better and more intimate and more powerful sex with his girlfriend. And I think he was expecting me to give him a technique or put your hands here and rub or something like that. And I just pointed him towards presence again. I just said, just be more present with your girlfriend before, during, and after sex, and you'd be amazed what happens. And it's just funny because the next time I talked to him, the next coaching call that we had, he said that his girlfriend just started having multiple orgasms, and she during one sex period. And she had never done that before, and he had never done that before with another woman. And I was really excited, and I said, I was like, oh, great. So do you think this presence, being present helped? And he said, no. It's funny because it's just like, he had, having done nothing else, it's just so unbelievable. And I think perhaps for men in general, but it could be for everyone that presence could be the key, that like he just thought it was luck or chance, and that something else might have changed. But so that's happened in a few of my clients' sex lives, where they'll go from having, okay or average sex to just mind-blowing great sex with their girlfriends, and having sharing multiple orgasms and having more powerful orgasms themselves, which is another important thing, because many people think the female orgasm is elusive, but when it does happen, it's normally incredibly powerful and can be full-bodied and can be a really wonderful experience. And the other thing I train for guys is they learn these principles of getting more present themselves, that their own orgasms can improve, because for the most part, men's orgasms are really just very located or very localized towards their hip and torso region. And once they start learning a little bit more about tantra and presence, then they can have as powerful as an orgasm as a woman can. So it works both ways in my experience.
And Tom, could you just tell us a little bit more about, say, if someone says to you, well, how can I get more present, or how can I get more connected to my partner? Like, how do you stop it becoming like another technique or another how-to, kind of like, oh, right, okay, now I've got to be more present. Do you know what I mean? Because then it's in danger of them becoming like another thing, like touch here or do that or whatever. Like, how do you kind of go beyond the technique there?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I do avoid techniques. I don't say, well, try pausing and breathing for 10 seconds. That's when I normally introduce the principles behind how our minds work. So it's almost, it seems like it's a different subject, but to me it's exactly what really how I met you and Lucy through, which is I learned that my experience and all of my clients' experiences, everyone in the world is generating their thoughts from the inside out. So it's just the feelings of anxiety during sex, or the feelings of happiness, the feelings of anything is really just being generated by their own selves. And then the second insight I point them to is what they're connected to. So it's that, to me, that helps get me present. But the other thing that helps give me confidence per se is knowing that is my core state, is a state of confidence and wholeness and love. And so I always point clients to presence and self-love. It's just who we are. So there's nothing that we need to ever have to do. I point them in this direction. I tell them a little bit about the paradigm, which is, this is the way it works. You don't need to do anything to have more of a clear mind. In fact, we just need to do nothing. So if I ever do get prescriptive, I prescribe acceptance. So if they're in their heads, I just say, well, just accept it. It's happening. It's something that's happening to you. Or, if you're not having an orgasm, or if your girlfriend isn't having orgasms, just the same thing. Whatever. That's happening. Know where her experience is coming from, and then just accept what's happening in the moment. And then I find myself and in my clients' places, the more that they accept what's going on in the moment, the easier it is for them to move through feelings of anxiety or feelings of sexual inadequacy and back into a more pleasurable and intimate space.
I can really feel how relaxed that kind of just saying that idea that sort of we are whole already, and there's nothing to do specifically to be any better or whatever. It kind of just like, I could just feel that even when you say it, it's just kind of like letting yourself off the hook, and it is so simple, but it's a message that we just don't really hear, do we?
Yeah, I agree. It's like letting yourself off the hook is everything to me. It is, because we think that people are blaming us, or we think that we're responsible for other people's experience, and everyone thinks that about themselves. So when a girl's not orgasming, she thinks it's her fault, and when a guy thinks it's his fault. So walking around in this reality, this fake story, and it is just about realizing that it's not real, and seeing that it's all okay, it's all perfect, it's all. And so it kind of comes back to that, I'm seeing this more and more, is when you're resisting it, when you're trying to fix it, you're actually creating it more, because you're resisting it, so you're focusing on it. If you've got a hot oven or you've got a hot plate and you put your finger on it and it burns, you don't just hold it there, you take it away, you take your hand off the stove. And it's the same with any issue that we think is a problem, anything where we're beating ourselves up about not being able to do something. And so being present is that, it's that place of no thought, it's being in the room. And I don't want to give a technique, but it is like what you said, it's about not being in your head, it's about being in your body. So if you can move your awareness to the body rather than trying to work it out with the mind.
Yeah, I actually do have a nuance that's not totally related to the principles about the body. So there's 7 keys of Tantra. And so when I'm teaching guys about how to have more powerful and intimate sex, I teach them mainly these principles and our inside out paradigm. But then I also teach them that, like, there is a manual, like there is some ways that the body works. And it sounds like I might be sliding back into this into prescription, like I try to avoid to begin with. But I also feel like they interweave with Tantra, and two of the keys of Tantra are breath and sound. And it's an amazing experience for guys to explore this, because and it's going to sound a little personal, but like for most men, and I also feel like a little bit for women in general, we start exploring our bodies when we're teenagers, and our parents normally don't tell us how do we use our bodies, what do we do. So we normally start exploring it a little bit in shame and in quietness, because things are going on in our bodies, and we don't want our parents to hear as we start playing ourselves or pleasuring ourselves when we're younger. And so for men in particular, basically we start masturbating, in the quietness of our bedrooms or the quietness of our bathrooms, hoping our parents don't hear us. And they get incredibly just low-powered orgasms, like after thousands of times of masturbating throughout their childhood, all of a sudden they've programmed themselves to have low-level orgasms. And depending on how much women explore their own bodies, that can be the exact same thing. And so to me, this isn't a paradigm of thought thing. This is like our bodies do hold in actual behaviors per se, and 2 of the keys are breath and sound, like I said. So I start teaching men when they come to my course. They start I tell them, do a thing, just do an experiment, start pleasuring yourself, and instead of doing your normal thing, whatever that looks like, just start breathing a little more heavily and start making sound. Be okay with what it sounds like to have good full-bodied breaths coming out of in and out of your body. And then all of a sudden they come back to me and just say that they've actually experienced the feeling of sexual energy for the first time in their lives beyond just their hip regions. And I would, and so this is one of the things I'm prescribing to anyone else that's hearing this. It is a great, huge deal mental, but there is also you're in a body, you're in a physical body that has ways of circulating energy and circulating things because it's like taking care of the brain. We still have a central nervous system. So this might be a little off topic, but I suggest trying that also, which is just breathe, do what the body feels natural. That's one of the things that people aren't even aware of, is that they're stifling their own experience. Once they do get present, and once they do connect to the feeling of the love that they are, and they're still not feeling anything, it just might be they're using their body the wrong way. Just breathe a little bit more and make some more noises and be comfortable with that. And I find that the more that everyone does that, all of a sudden you'll just feel magnitudes more of pleasure and intimacy. And the same goes for you, Joe. Like one of the things I would prescribe, if you're already, I feel, have a sense of grounding, and you get to a point where there's maybe too much pleasure happening for you, that's one of the things you can do to circulate all of those way intense feelings throughout your body is just breathe a little bit more and make some sounds while you're being intimate, and you'll notice that energy that's really intense probably in one point might spread throughout your entire body and just make it a completely wonderful experience for you.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying actually, because it's kind of and although you're saying it's kind of off topic, I kind of feel like it was really connected to that, because that's such a simple thing. And again, it's kind of just being really, really fully in the moment. So not kind of like stifling or holding back, but just really just kind of like being in that experience, whatever that looks like or whatever that sounds like. Yeah, so it's just purely there. And yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant too, and I really think I think it's great that you said that, because I know that some people, especially men, it's a very doing action, etc. is something new. It's a new way of seeing it as positive. So that's great. I mean, I think I've got so much from this conversation. It's been amazing, Thom. It has been amazing. I feel like you're so clear on this. It just is just comes through you so easily, and I just think there's got to be so many people that you can help out there. Is there anything else you want to tell us about or let us know, or any more that you want to say on this?
The only other thing I'd add is we're having a great conversation about orgasms and female orgasm here, and I feel that a lot of these principles and the paradigms of how our minds work and being present and connecting to this feeling of love, it's not just for orgasm. I do just general relationship coaching and dating coaching for single men, and when, let's say, you're on a first date and you're just nervous and don't know what to say, you don't know how to get to the second date, you don't know when to kiss the person in front of you. Connecting to these principles helps exactly there also. So it's some type of cheat code for life. It's some type of just super powerful way of living. And I'm excited for your listeners to hear about how they can apply this to their sex lives. And I also just want to hope that they don't limit it there, because it applies to so much more. And I'm just excited for whoever is inspired by what we're talking about and explores it a little further.
Yeah, same here. I'm so excited about this conversation, and I just like to say that you're just so clear on this. Like, it's so good. It's just so powerful. So I know that people are going to get a lot out of this. And so how can people reach you if they need to?
The two easiest ways are my email and website. And so my email is tom@thomcarey.com. And I spell my name a little oddly, so it's THOM at THOMCAREY.com. And then my website is just thomcarey.com. So if they reach me there, they can find other things about me, like my Facebook sites. But that's just the easiest way to reach me. And I'd love to talk to any of your listeners that have questions. I'd love to point them point them towards some good advice, or point them to other resources that I've used to help my sex improve. So. Yeah, if anyone has questions, I'd love to answer them.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, it's great.
Yeah, perfect. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me on.
And if you'd like to contact us, our email addresses are lucy@lucyforlife.com and Joe, J-O, @joe-munday.com. Thanks very much.